Hello and welcome to Western History Alive. I'm Kim Copel and I'll be your tour guide as we bring the past into the present, making history come alive. Today we're at the South Lake Tahoe Museum here in South Lake Tahoe, California, and we're going to talk about two very important events that helped shape Northern California and Northern Nevada's future, not to mention the entire United States. When the West opened up to people, and there were people who were in the East, that the everyday average person that wanted an opportunity that they weren't getting in their own cities and towns, and they wanted their own space, their own land, ranches. They wanted their families to have a better future, better opportunities for their children. The only way they were going to be able to do this was to travel west of the Mississippi River. West of the Mississippi River was uncivilized at this time. There was nobody living out there except for what people referred to as savages. We didn't have the politically correct term that we use today, Native Americans, because they weren't even thought of as Americans. So when the West opened up and there was an opportunity to spread out all across this land that was barren and not used, people knew there would be hardships, and they knew they would have to deal with the savages, and they would have to deal with the 40-mile deserts and no water, and bringing their cattle and their family and their transportation that they had at that time through a lot of hardship, but it was worth it to them. If you can imagine leaving a city where there was civilization, there were in many cases railroads, many cases the telegraph, all these modern conveniences of the 1840s and 50s, to go to somewhere where they've never been before, where explorers might have mentioned some of the terrain or some of the animals that were out there. But they wanted something of their own so bad that in the 1840s, people started heading west and claiming land. Now, actually, most of the wagon trains, as they were called at that time, left from Missouri. And when they crossed the Mississippi River, they were on their own. And they followed many different routes. There were many different prescribed routes that had been explored, and some that hadn't been explored that well. I'm sure we're mostly familiar with the Donner Party tragedy, and that had a lot to do with them following the Hastings Cutoff, which they found later was a not completely explored shortcut. Put them into the Sierra Nevada at the worst time of year, and then it was the worst winter in many, many years. And then, as we all know what happened, not all of the Donner Party came out alive. So people started following alternate routes. One of the alternate immigrant routes went right through the Carson Sink and into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada through Genoa, and then up over what we now know as the Carson Pass. Now, that wasn't all that much easier to get over. They still had to disassemble wagons and take everything out of their wagons and take everything up the side of the mountain one at a time. But they weren't going to get stuck in the snow like they did, or have the possibility of getting stuck like they did in 1847, like the Donner Party did. So along about 1850, well, the gold rush was well in motion, as gold had been discovered at Sutter's Mill in 1849. So everybody in the United States and in other countries was heading west to become rich. So the roads, the wagon roads were clogged with people. We think we have traffic today. You don't understand traffic. People, there were men, there were horses, there was oxen, there was bumper-to-bumper traffic with wagons. I understand from reading some first-hand accounts that if a wagon pulled out of line for any reason, it might take a full day to get back into line. It was that packed. But people were heading west to become rich, for a better life, and it still was very difficult. I mean, do you realize that along the way, the wagon roads across the West were littered with carcasses of animals, with people's belongings once they realized that they didn't really need them if they wanted to survive and get that wagon across the desert, pianos, furniture, and also lined with grave markers. Family members were lost along the way as well. And they survived, attacks from the Indians. So now you can imagine their desire to get across the West and to have a better life. And they did. They were hard workers, and they were willing to do what it took to establish the West that we have today here in the Sierra Nevada. Now, along about 1860, the gold rush was over. It had petered out in California, and there were other places where there were gold strikes in the United States or in Canada. But in a town a little bit east of Genoa, known as Dayton, just up Gold Canyon, where they were discovering some gold here and there in the off-season, they discovered a new precious metal called silver. And the rush was on again, only going east instead of west. So the roads were clogged again, and more people came out west to stake their claim and to have a better life. And the roads were clogged once again going to Washoe and Virginia City. Well, something else was happening along 1860. You see, our United States was having a lot of problems getting along. We had southern states that had seceded from the Union over slavery issues and other issues that they just couldn't come to terms with the Union's way of life. President Buchanan at the time was very fearful of losing the gold from California and the silver from Virginia City to the southern states that had seceded. So he put out a call to anyone who could come up with a way to deliver messages in mail from east to west in less than the 24 days that was the shortest time at the time by stagecoach. And it was three gentlemen who had a freighting firm. Their names were Russell, Majors, and Waddell, who came up with a system of horses and men as a relay to travel the near 2,000 miles from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California in just 10 days. This was known as the Pony Express. Now, they had to run 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And they had to have young men who were not very heavy, who were very light of stature, who had a lot of endurance and knew how to ride, and a lot of experience being outside and out in the West. And they accomplished what they set out to do by having stations every 10 to 15 miles apart so these men could change horses. And then the men would change every 75 to 100 miles at their home stations. And they carried mail in what was called a mochila. And that was a sack that sat free of a saddle so that it could be changed at a station in literally 30 seconds. And the mail was very important mail. It wasn't, little letters to Aunt Edna back in New Jersey to ask about her garden. No, these were things that were very important to the West Coast to know about the state of the Union, so that propaganda could not take hold in say, San Francisco and the western cities, where most of the people who had the money and the power were Southern sympathizers. So within 10 days, they were able to get messages and mail back and forth, and they did this from October 3rd of 1860 until October 24th of 1861. Now that was just 18 months. But it was something that was so vital to keeping the Union together by getting the information out there, that it became something so romantic and so embedded in the United States' sense of history that today people still talk about it and don't even realize it only lasted 18 months. Now I have a surprise for you today. When we come back, we're going to meet a real-life living legend who participates in today's Highway 50 Wagon Train and the National Pony Express Reride in his mission to keep our Western history alive. Welcome back to Western History Alive. It's my honor to have as a guest today a true living legend, Davey "Doc" Weiser.
Thank you.
Oh, it's so nice to see you again. I haven't seen you for about a year. Welcome to our show.
Good to be back. I always get excited when I get to come up and see all you lovely folks at the lake.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's so nice to see you. Before we get started, I have a question for you. How'd you get the nickname Doc?
Well, I showed up on my first wagon train in 1978 with a tuxedo top hat, doctor's buggy and my little bag with a bottle of Excedrin and a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I was the good doctor that they came to see morning, noon, and night.
That's a funny story, because I've always known you as Davey, and I never even thought to ask how you got the name.
That's how I got the name.
Well, you mentioned the Wagon Train. You know, how long have you been involved with these going on in June, the Wagon Train, the National Pony Express?
37 years I've been doing the Wagon Train, and when I started in 1978, the Wagon Train started in July, and then because of traffic and logistics, they moved us up to June. Now we're June 1st to the 7th this year, out of Zephyr Cove to Placer.
Wow, wow. Well, how'd you get involved in something like this? I mean, have you lived here all your life, or?
Well, no, I grew up down in Eagle Rock, California, and I always watched Hopalong Cassidy movies and Randolph Scott and all those great old Western actors. And then I hired out on the railroad. I worked 50 years and 17 days for Southern Pacific Railroad as a conductor. And I found we got system seniority, so I came up and worked out of Roseville, and that's where I finished my tour of duty.
Oh, wow. So you've actually taken a train many times through the Donner Summit.
Oh yes, and gone through that 2-mile tunnel up there, gone to Dunsmuir, Fresno, Bakersfield, Yuma, Arizona, San Luis Obispo, all over the countryside.
Wow. So when you were a child watching these Western movies, is that the seed that was implanted in your mind to live out some sort of Western lifestyle?
I'm sure it was. I used to go to the matinee for 9 cents and watch 10 cartoons and a Hopalong Cassidy movie.
You know, it was movies like that and actors like Randolph Scott and Hopalong Cassidy that kept the West alive.
Absolutely.
In the generation between the time of when we had the internet and ways to learn, you know, just virtually or go to a lot of museums. And this, I think, helped to keep the Western history alive and inspire many people today, because there's been a resurgence of interest in how we came to be.
Absolutely.
So I think that's fantastic that just the movies inspired
And Bob
you.
Steele, Ken Maynard, Hoot Gibson, the Rough Riders, Colonel Tim McCoy, and Chief Ironsides. In fact, I used to watch it on Saturday morning, and then I'd go outside and do a rain dance, and it rained one day, and I'd come running out, Mom, I made it rain, I made it rain.
So you knew it worked.
Yeah, I knew it worked.
Oh,
That's what they said.
what does that
If
mean?
it rains today, I'm responsible.
I don't know, maybe this year we could use some of that mojo
We need that mojo working.
Yeah, but not during the Wagon Train.
Well, it snowed on us. The first year it snowed on us is 1992, and we stopped at Harvey's, and later they told us we drank 8 gallons of hot chocolate, but I did manage to squeeze in a shot of Jack Daniels.
Well, I would have too with that snow.
Oh, it was cold.
Now, can you give us a little bit of history on how the Wagon Train got started? Because I think it started on an anniversary and there was some promoter up there.
Well, it was 1949, and all the merchants on the Highway 50 corridor got together. Harvey, Gross, Bleacher, Ellsworth, just to name a few, and they had the Wagon Train in 49, and it was a big success. Well, in 50, they didn't have it, and boy did they get their butt chewed. So in 51, and the only year they did it, they went eastbound, and it couldn't do it now because of the traffic, because it was all uphill, and that was the only year they went eastbound. And then after that, we've been going every year, and this is the 65th year, and anybody can rent a seat on a wagon. All you got to do is check in the day before and wear Western clothes. Do not bring your flip-flops or your wristwatch.
Because the whole idea is to feel it, even if you have to feel it down here.
That's right. Bring a cushion if you're going to sit on a lead hitch.
The way it was then, and that gives you a very good impression of what these people had to endure.
It was rough. You can
2,000
imagine
miles.
the Donner Party out there, nobody to help, no stores available. No towns had really sprouted up yet, so they were out there. The only mistake they made, they went the wrong time of year.
Yeah. It was kind of what we call a Titanic a type of events that all happened to them, because the Stephen Townsend Murphy party that went the year before, they got through okay in a snowstorm and just added one member. One of the women was pregnant and had a baby.
Yeah, well, that's great. The group, though, that took the right turn, that was with the Donner Party, made a wise decision.
Made a very wise decision, yes. Well, can you give us a little bit of information on where we might be able to see the Wagon Train go through And, you know, when it starts, where it goes
Well,
through, where you camp?
We'll be at Zephyr Cove on Saturday. The wagons will be coming in. You can go there, visit, talk to the horses. They know more.
Yeah, I talked to the
And the
horses.
people look at the wagons, and then we'll stop at Rufus Allen out here for lunch, and that's a good place to catch us if you want to view what's going on. Most of our stops now are private because of insurance reasons, but our big one will be Friday on the 6th at High Hill Ranch on Apple Hill, and then we'll go into Placerville on the 7th, and that'll be on Placerville Drive, be a big dance and barbecue.
That's what I understand, is you guys really do it up big in Placerville when you make
High
it.
Hill Ranch, they have cowboy poetry and a barbecue also, so you know, if you want to take a drive, come over to High Hill Ranch on Apple Hill, get situated, watch the wagon train come in.
I believe, is there a website where people can look up what's going on with the wagon
Yes,
train?
highway50wagontrain.com, and then if you want the Pony Express, it's xphomestation.com.
Yes, yes, and that's happening about the same time too.
Yeah, that'll be on June 12th. They'll come over the summit, go over 89 to 88 and into Woodford's and hand the Mochila off to the first Nevada rider.
Right, right. Now, there was something else I was going to ask you, and now I can't remember what it was. Well, you look a little different than the last time I was looking at you. What are you dressed for right now?
Well, I had to go back in time and get my Pony Express outfit on, so I thought it would only be apropos if I did the rest of this in perfect style.
Well, you reminded me. I was going to ask you a little bit about the National Pony Express Association and their annual rewrite. Now, you told us a little bit about the Wagon Train and how long you've been involved with the Wagon Train. How did you get involved with the National Pony Express Association?
Well, this will be my 31st year, and how it got started, I was coming back from my parents on the train, and I read in the paper, the Pony Express actually delivers the mail. When they had the slide up on Highway 50 in '83, McFarland was the first rider out of the Pollock Pines post office, so I called them up, got set up, and I rode my horse Sophie, my very first horse, over a trail that hadn't been ridden over in 123 years.
Wow.
From the Ice House Information Center, which is now Cleveland Information Center, and instead of going all the way up to Weber Mill Road, I cut across the shortcut. There's a little trail there, and went down and cut off, and we went Weber Mill Road, which brought us out at Silver Fork. Well, Ed Hagan and Doug Albright were riding that one day, and the mail truck come by and laughed at him because he went by him. But, you know, the one who laughs last has the best laugh. Well, he got stuck in the mud, and they went by him and laughed. And they're coming into Kybers, and they hear the roar of that Jeep, and they kicked it in the butt, and they beat that mail truck by about 20 feet. And that postmaster told that driver, "Don't you ever let the Pony Express beat you again."
That's a great story. I hadn't heard that story.
Yeah, and it was funny. I loved it. And so we had a lot of fun. We were in newspapers all around the world. And the Nevada riders come down to Kybers and took it to Little Norway and got in the act. And it was a lot of fun for 3 months. We actually officially delivered the mail per a requisition by the Postmaster General.
Right, right. I read that there were about 60 members of both California and Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the roster. That was a time when women weren't allowed to ride in the Pony Express. It was all men.
It was all men then.
And you carried over 6,000 pieces of mail, I understand. And what was your payment for the day? You guys didn't want to be paid, but by the requisition you had to
They
have
donated.
a nominal amount.
I think they donated 50. The post office paid us $50 to our treasury. But the good deal was, Walt Harmon at the Sportsman Hall.
Mm-hmm.
He had a Pony Express hamburger for $2, man, and we were always up there to get that Pony Express hamburger for $2.
Oh, well, that was history, because to this day there's only 3 entities that are allowed to carry the United States mail. And that's the U.S. Postal Service, of course, the National Coast Guard, and the National Pony Express Association. And that was the first time we had a government contract, because back in 1860 and 61 it was a private enterprise.
That's right. They never did get it. Russell, Majors, and Waddell tried. They could never get them. They promised them, but
They promised them.
They were the forerunners of the politicians of today.
That's right.
It's a promise. I'll give it to you
That's
if
right.
you can catch up with me.
Sounds a lot like today, yes. Now, so you've been riding for over 30 years. Now, When, and I didn't ask you before, so let's jump back for a moment just to the Wagon Train, because I want people to know where to look for you in the Wagon Train. Where will we get to see you?
I'll be at the rear of the Wagon Train in my little doctor's buggy, tuxedo and top hat that you saw me in earlier, and I usually stay back there, and if I'm asleep, just say, "Wake up, Doc."
Wake up, Doc.
You know, and also on the Pony Express, over 600 riders from Sacramento to St. Joe, Missouri.
Right, right. And a lot of them are from other countries.
Yeah, some of them come over because there's other divisions. There's 8 states we go through. It's too late now, but if you want to buy a letter for next year, you send $5 in, and it's usually a vignette of one of the 8 states, or they've got a $10 letter that you can write a personal letter, but you have to get it in super early.
Really early, yes.
Yes,
yeah. So,
but it's a great collector's item.
Yeah, and if you haven't done that, you know, just check on xphomestation.com, like you mentioned, or with our museum, because we always have those letters that people can fill out, those forms people can fill out for a letter and mail in. So that is a fun way, because it goes this year. I guess the Pony Express is leaving from Sacramento at what time?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. down at Old Town Sacramento.
Yeah, and also you might check with the Pony Express afterwards, or even now. They might still have some letters, because usually they print a certain number, like 1,000 or something. And if I remember right, yeah, I was at the swearing in dinner Saturday. They sold 400 and some odd letters of the vignettes, and 156 of the personal letters. So there might be some letters available if you call them up and get the right guy and send your money.
Yeah, maybe, because what will happen is they'll go into the Mochila, and this is a Mochila from the California division. They usually have 4 cantinas, one on either side of the front and one on either side of the back. This was a special Mochila one year that they made 6 cantinas and decided quickly that that was not comfortable for the riders, so they never tried that again. But this is on loan from the California division of the National Pony Express Association. And Doc actually signed it right here. His signature is right here. But they go in, the letters will go in the cantinas in Sacramento, and then it'll be locked up, and nobody can get into those cantinas until it gets to St. Joseph, Missouri, 10 days later.
At the Patee House.
At the Patee House. They'll open up the cantinas, put these in the mail after they stamp a St. Joseph, Missouri Pony Express stamp on it, because one will already be on your letter from California. And then it will go by U.S. mail, but your letters traveled by Pony Express.
And it's supposed to be also put in a cellophane envelope so they won't mess up our cancellation.
Yeah, that's true, because
Although a couple of years lately I've got it without the cellophane, and I guess they just didn't cancel them, they left them alone.
Yeah, I have 2 myself. I've never gotten any with that.
But it is great collector's item, and if you can write a personal letter, just think about your ancestors 50, 100 years from now reading that, and it actually got carried by the historic National Pony Express.
By the real deal. Not that you guys aren't the real deal.
We are the real deal.
You are the real deal.
We actually, all those riders that were on the slide ride, they got a list of them. And we all actually, like you said, had a contract with the government.
Yeah.
And we got paid $50 for our treasury. They wanted to keep us in the 1860 rates.
Yeah, apparently. Now, can you tell me, or tell us, I'm sorry, real quickly, what is the reason for this re-ride? What is it supposed to accomplish?
Well, McFarlane and Walt Ellen and a host of other guys got together back in '68, and they said, you know, it'd be nice to have the ride. So they started doing the ride, just trying to look at the trail and see what they had to clean up. And then they got a hold of some Nevada guys, and then they got a hold of a few other states, and pretty soon we had 8 states, and they started getting it going, and they did the first ride. I can't remember the exact year, but they started doing the ride state by state, and it took off big guns. And then the slide ride magnified it even more. And you know, it's all the guys that love the Old West, and I know a lot of you are out there right now watching this. It's, you know, there's little kids, and then there's guys like us a little guy stuck in a big guy body.
And in some cases, little girls stuck in
Little
a girl
girl stuck
body.
in a big girl body too, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful event, and people, especially living on the trail, are aware of it, and they make sure they're out there to watch it go by, and you're watching history.
Oh, absolutely, and we take good care of our horses. Most of us that ride on any of the rough, rocky trails or pavement, I have borium on my shoe, which is a tungsten substance that's welded here, here, and here. Then I have a plastic pad here with pine tar packing that gives the tennis shoe effect. So we've got all the modern technologies for our horses. And you know, I've been running my horses on the pavement for years, and they're just fine.
Yeah, you have to consider the horses like they did back then.
Yeah, use all the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, now, you know, you are a man of many hats, as I've already seen, but I understand that when you're not on the Wagon Train in June, and you're not on the Pony Express Trail in June, what do you do the other 11 months? I know you do something.
Well, yes. I give free stagecoach rides every third Saturday in Placerville at the Bell Tower, noon to 3. And I do train rides on Sunday for the El Dorado Western Railroad, which is a new railroad that's been running since June 26, 2011. Right now we're using motorized speeder cars, and it's $5 for adults, $3 for kids, and under 3 is free. And we come out of El Dorado one weekend, the first and third Sunday, and the second and fourth Sunday we come out of Shingle Springs. And when we come out of Shingle, we go about a mile past Red Hawk Casino.
Oh.
And on the old Placerville SP branch. And we've got 10 miles of track that the Board of Supervisors of El Dorado County has designated a rail park. So we're working on the track, and we're working on getting our big equipment together. We got the little Plymouth engine, and we got the SP 1094 caboose, which I worked on in 1964 on the Chatsworth Local, and I cooked breakfast for my crew, steak, eggs, potatoes, and coffee, and then I'd call them on a radio and say breakfast is ready, and then they'd come over and we'd eat.
And so now you get to help restore it and keep it running.
Yes.
And you didn't even know that back in 1960.
No, I didn't realize.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. This has been a fantastic, fantastic experience, and I'm just very honored.
Well, I'm pleased.
Thank you. And good luck to you on both rides. And then and I'm going to have to get down there and take a stagecoach ride and take a train ride.
And remember, Lake Tahoe, we want you.
And if you want to find out more about our Wagon Roads and the Pony Express and see the exhibits that we have here in the Lake Tahoe Museum, we're open, we're located at 3058 Lake Tahoe Boulevard in South Lake Tahoe, California. And after June 4th, we will be open Wednesday through Sunday. If you want more information, you can call 530. Oh, I think I'm forgetting the number here. 530, well, how about this? Why don't you just look up the website, which is laketahoemuseum.org, or you can email them at laketahoemuseum@att.net. And if you have an idea for a show for Western History Alive, you can call me at 775-220-0605 or email me at info@genoahistoricghosttours.com, or you can check out my Facebook page, which is by the same name, Western History Alive. I'd like you to remember this. History is made every moment, every hour, and every day by every one of us. Make our history count. Keep it alive. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time right here on Western History Alive.